it is not uncommon for us to see farms where 20% of the sheep have some level of lameness. By lameness, we're not necessarily talking about sheep now that are carrying a foot or kneeling down. We're talking about any sheep that has an unusual gait as a result of an injury or infection on his foot. Generally, if you run a batch of sheep, the last 15 or 20 that aren't able to keep up, they're lame. Lameness reduces performance because it causes pain, it prevents them from foraging, they spend more time lying down, all of those type of things.
Hello, I'm Kieran Lynch and welcome to Teagasc, the Teagasc Sheep Podcast. Each episode will bring you latest insights, advice and technical updates for the sheep industry. Now, with weaning approaching many farms, attention begins to turn towards preparing the ewes for the next breeding season and maintaining lamb performance. In this episode, I'm joined with Teagasc Sheep Specialist Michael Gottstein to discuss some of the key priorities for the weeks ahead. We cover grassland management and autumn reseeds, weaning and drying off ewes and managing body condition score, as well as mineral supplementation for lambs and why tackling lameness should remain a priority in sheep farms.
I suppose if we start with grassland management, it's been challenging enough season to maintain quality and quantity at times. What are a couple of key tips for grassland management as we head through July?
Yeah, so looking from a grassland management point of view, I suppose at this stage now, a lot of farmers will be weaning or thinking about weaning. So shortly we'll have kind of two groups of stock on the farm. We'll have the dry ewes and we'll have the lambs. So I suppose in terms of from the lamb perspective, I suppose driving lamb performance, it's up to them now. They don't have mommy to depend on, so the grass that they get is going to have a significant impact in terms of how well they thrive. So really, for the weaned lambs, we're talking about kind of going in around 9 or 10 centimeters of grass. Good leafy grass is what we want, not stemmy stuff or stuff that's headed out. If it's a whole pile longer than that, it's too strong. And then we'd want to be grazing it down to about 6 centimeters. At 6 centimeters, we'd want to be coming back out again and then using something else, either dry ewes in good condition or suckler cows or something like that to clean it out fully. So we don't want to be grazing the lambs down really tight, I suppose. And the big thing, I suppose, that we see in particular when grass takes off, and at the moment, like we're getting reasonably good warm weather followed by rain, so there's no moisture deficit or any of those kind of things, and grass growths are quite good. When grass takes off, there often we have that kind of thinking that, oh Jesus, we better move them on quick there and keep up with it, and you're actually better off to skip rather than trying to catch grass that is going too strong. So rather than going into a paddock or a field that's too strong and trying to manage it, skip that paddock if the next paddock is at the right level. If the next paddock or field is at the right level, you skip the one that's too strong, go into that and take that strong one out as bales. And that's really the best option, because what that does is it resets everything to the right kind of level then for us to continue on our rotation. So I suppose in a nutshell, here on the grass, kind of in at around 9 centimeters, good leafy grass is what we want. Out at 6, something else to clean up after them, to graze it out fully, and keep the grass right for the lambs, so that they keep thriving.
And again, as you highlight there, those surplus bales can be a big benefit in winter as well. So don't be afraid to take them if you need to. But making that decision quick, Mike, is key there too.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Michael, is there an opportunity maybe as we progress through the month to look at reseeding? Probably we haven't seen as much on a lot of dry stock farms over the last year or two. We've seen a bit of damage on paddocks in the spring and that. Is there an opportunity maybe to correct some of that with an autumn reseed?
Yeah, so look at, I suppose, 2 times in the year really generally where we reseed. One is in the springtime, one in the autumn. There probably wasn't that many opportunities in the spring this year with the bad weather and all that type of stuff. If people have areas identified for reseeding, the big thing with reseeding in the autumn time is to do it early. Very often we've seen people reseeding into late August, maybe even into early September, and basically those reseeds struggle from the get-go because they just your bet for time in terms of getting them grazed and thickened up, your bet in terms of weather often for doing the post-emergent spraying of the weeds. So really, if we're thinking about reseeding, July is the month that we should be looking to get the reseeding done. So that's, if you're thinking about a reseeding process, if you're doing the whole bells and whistles, burn off, let the grass desiccate, plow it, harrow it, put in the seeds, really we should be looking at all that happening in July. and have our seeds up at the end of July into August, then do our post-emergence spray towards the end of August and get our couple of grazings, get the field thickened up before the winter comes, get those seedlings really well established, before the winter comes. And that gives the reseed a real good start. Gets it through the winter in good condition, and that's a sward that's really going to kick off then for us next year.
Michael, like, you've the potential there to get 3 good grazings off that. A good option there for lambs finishing as well at this stage of the season.
Yep, super ground for lambs to go on to, and they are the ideal type of animal, light animal, to graze it out, give it a couple of runs of the grazings, three or four grazings, get it to thicken up, and and very important, I suppose, for seeds, reseeds, especially if they're weedy, is to go in with that post-emergent spray kind of 3 or 4 weeks after it's established, to blow out any of the kind of seedling docks and thistles and nettles and stuff like that that are coming up.
No, this is an important point. Look, you mentioned weaning there. We have seen some flocks have weaned already. Others tended to lay. Michael, like, the challenge there maybe of not weaning, like, what is the downsides of it, and what do we need to look at there in terms of getting those lambs off and maybe looking at drying off those ewes?
Yeah, so look, at often people think, maybe particularly if lambs are a little bit behind or something, I leave them on the ewes for a couple of extra weeks, it'll do them good. And all the research work shows that it's actually the opposite that happens, because we're at the time of the year where grass quality is a little bit more challenging, and you have the ewes competing with the lambs for the best grass. So remember that the sheep are preferential grazers, so they'll seek out the more succulent leaves first. So when you leave a group of ewes and lambs in, the ewes are selecting that grass as well. They're not milking a whole pile at that stage, so they're not adding a whole lot to the lambs. So really, 14 weeks of age is the latest that we should be weaning. Maybe even for your lambs that went to the ram as your lambs and are lambing down for the first time as hoggets, even maybe weaning them at 12 weeks would be beneficial, because it gives them a little bit more time to come back. So really, I suppose the message is, in terms of weaning, is get it done by 14 weeks. That should be the latest that lambs are left on the ewes, and delaying it actually reduces performance. It doesn't improve performance, which is the opposite to what a lot of people think. And I suppose the other thing then that you mentioned was the drying up of the ewes. Um, w- I suppose historically, when ewes are weaned, they're dried off, put into a bare piece of ground, and often, I suppose, then we let them lose a bit of weight, or knock around and clean up, and they're forgotten about for a couple of months. And we tend to think that mating time is a long way away. It's down the road there in October, and sure, there's plenty of time. The reality is, I suppose, there isn't a lot of time to build condition on ewes, in particular ewes that are thin at weaning time, that have done a good job on their lambs. And in order to get them ewes into good body condition, and our target there is 3.5, body condition score of 3.5, a lot of those ewes will have to put on maybe 10 kilos of live weight, and that's going to take time and food and feeding. So really, I suppose, in terms of drying up the ewes, a week to 10 days of drying up the ewes, short and sharp, restrict the diet, access to water, clean field with not a lot of grass on it. That's what you want. And then, the very minute they're dried up, in 7 or 8 or 9 days time, you pull the ewes in, pull off the thin ones, and start feeding them. And by feeding them, we're not talking about giving them meal or anything like that. We're talking about giving them good grass. So these ewes then need to be put on a good plane of nutrition, so that they can build up this, 8, 10, 12 kilos of body weight that they need. And what that does basically is it sets the ewes up then for the next mating. They're in good body condition going to the ram. It increases your litter size. It reduces your lambing spread. It reduces health issues throughout the pregnancy. It improves lamb survival the following year. And more importantly, it improves lamb performance the following year. And that's a message, I suppose, we're trying to get across to farmers, is that how you feed your ewes this summer and into the autumn is going to impact how well your lambs will grow in 2027. Not a lot of people, make that connection, that by slimming my ewes, or putting them onto a bit of rough ground or somewhere and forgetting about them for a couple of months, I'm actually going to harm my lamb performance for next year. And we would have good information coming back from research and from the Better Farm program on that, showing that, ewes that are in good body condition rear lambs that grow faster the following year. So that's the aim, I think, for people this year, is to
And
look
Michael,
after them.
like that dry period cannot be underestimated, and that knock-on impact. The very simple process there of just splitting off them ewes, giving them thin ones a wee bit of more attention early on, putting them with a ewe lamb group or that for a couple of weeks. It might be a
Yeah.
long-term thing, dealing with those issues.
Absolutely. I mean, if we were trying to put, if you let's just take, for example, the 10 kilos of live weight. If we were trying to put 10 kilos of live weight on lambs, say I have 35-kilo lambs there and try to bring them on to 45 kilos, it would take us a long time to do that, and it would take good grass to do that. And the ewes are no different. It takes time and it takes feeding, good quality grass. So that should be the aim for people. Pull off them thin ewes. The heavy ewes can go around, do a bit of cleaning. We still need to keep an eye on them that they don't lose body condition. But by and large, on most farms, what we have is lots of thin ewes. We don't have lots of fat ewes. People often talk about, oh, we don't want ewes to get over fat. Fat ewes are not a problem on most farms. It's thin ewes that are a problem. And they're the ones we need to be watching.
That's an important point. Look, we're talking about trade, you're talking there about putting on weight. Something else that crops up at this stage of the season is minerals and mineral supplementation, I suppose, particularly cobalt. How important is it, Michael, and now to address that at this point of the year?
Yep. So mineral supplementation, I think there's a lot of money spent on minerals, a lot of minerals out there, different types of combinations. I suppose a lot of confusion around that as well. By and large, now look at individual farms. There are farms out there that will have issues with individual minerals, and that's a discussion for your vet and blood tests and analysis and see what's happening. But the one that is widely deficient in Irish soil types is cobalt, and generally the main mineral that's lacking in sheep farms for lamb thrive is cobalt. So that's the one I'm going to concentrate on. Don't generally come across a whole pile of issues with the other ones. Having said that, there are individual farms that may, for various different reasons, have specific deficiencies, and they'll generally know that and have had those conversations with their vet. So from a cobalt point of view, the cobalt is important because the cobalt is used in the rumen to the bugs use it to synthesize vitamin B12, and vitamin B12 is important for lamb performance. So what we want to have is cobalt in the rumen, make available to the bugs so that they can synthesize this vitamin B12. That cobalt needs to be there on an ongoing basis. So there's nowhere in the rumen where cobalt can be stored. And generally, cobalt isn't stored anywhere else in the body either to any great extent. So when we give an oral dose of cobalt, it basically goes into the rumen and the bugs will use it. And over a period of probably around 48 hours, it'll work its way through the rumen and then it'll have left the body pretty quickly. So the bugs will have a store of it for a period of time, and generally we estimate that that's about 2 weeks. So from an oral drench, you're talking about 2 weeks roughly, after which you would need to be going in again with a second drench or subsequent drench if you want to keep the cobalt deficient. So that's for oral drenching, I suppose. In terms of boluses, there's lots of boluses out there on the market, and there's different combinations and formulations of boluses. And again, have a look at them. Generally, I'd be a fan of ionic cobalt or cobalt sulfate. Those are the cobalt formulations that are generally available in the rumen. The cobalt carbonate doesn't tend to be available in the rumen at the types of rumen pHs that we see in grass-fed sheep. Okay, so if you're using a cobalt carbonate based product, you'd want to be pretty sure that it's working. And the best way to check that is to treat some of the animals and not treat another proportion of them, and to monitor performance and to make sure that the treated animals are doing significantly better. The one thing that doesn't work for lambs, I suppose, is water supplementation, unless they're getting a lot of meal or it's very, very warm, dry weather. So generally, if we're giving cobalt, we're talking about either giving it orally, giving it as a bolus. I suppose there are some mineral lick buckets out there. If you can get them to lick them, that would work, or feeding it in the meal as a mineral supplement with concentrates. Obviously, there's a significant cost to the concentrates if you're purely feeding that to carry the cobalt. So those are the options. I think the most common ones we probably would see on farms, Kieran, are the oral doses and the boluses. So look at just if you're using them, if it's oral, need to go in every 2 weeks. And if it's a bolus, just make sure it's working.
Okay. And that's an important thing to keep an eye on. Mike, I suppose the other thing that will really pull back performance in lambs, in ewes, we're talking about putting on condition, we're talking about growing lambs. If we've lameness in the flock and we're not addressing it, that's going to hammer things. Probably a great chance now post-weaning to deal with some of those issues.
Absolutely essential. Look, at lameness is a big issue, and it's an issue that we're actually accustomed to looking at on farms, and it is not uncommon for us to see farms where 20% of the sheep have some level of lameness. And by lameness, we're not necessarily talking about sheep now that are carrying a foot or kneeling down. We're talking about any sheep that has an unusual gait as a result of an injury or infection on his foot. So a lot of what we'll say, the likes of Jake Delaney, who's been doing his PhD with us on this, would categorize as lame. Farmers mightn't even see as lame. They'd say, "Oh no, look, that's just a lamb that's walking a little bit slow." But generally, if you run a batch of sheep, the last 15 or 20 that aren't able to keep up, they're lame. And that's what we'd be saying. Getting on top of that, lameness reduces performance because it causes pain. It prevents them from foraging. They spend more time lying down. All of those type of things. So really important, I suppose, is that we get on top of lameness. And any time of the year is a good time to get on top of lameness. It's obviously easier to do it when we don't have ewes and lambs together, when they're separated and weaned, and you can do them in bunches. And I suppose the farms on which we've seen significant progress in terms of the reduction of lameness are farms that have put in batch footbaths. I think if there's one piece of equipment that every sheep farmer should have, it is a batch footbath. So that's basically, it's a very simple thing to construct: a couple of lintels and a little bit of mortar around, put it into an existing shed, or build it out of concrete with lips around it. An area that you can stand 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, depending on the size of your flock, sheep into, and leave them stand inside it. So this idea of having a couple of plastic bats in a race and walk the sheep through it, that's not foot batting. It's not effective. It doesn't really work unless you're catching scalds very early in the infection stage. So really what we want is something where we can stand sheep in for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. If you have a batch of lame sheep, you put them in there, keep them in separate paddock, run them back in after 2 or 3 days, stand them inside there for half an hour, and it really works. At farms that have this system set up, every time the sheep come into the handy unit, they end up spending 5, 10, 15 minutes inside in that footbath while they're being treated or, handled for various different bits and pieces. And what we see is a dramatic reduction in the incidence of lame sheep. And that improves animal performance. It improves the amount of labor associated with catching sheep and trying to deal with them individually. It reduces the amount of antibiotic use on those farms in terms of treating lame animals. So it's a win-win-win situation. And I suppose that's what we're recommending. Get on top of the lameness, invest in a batch footbath. You can buy proprietary ones. Off the shelf, or you can make it. It needs to be roofed ideally because we don't want the rain to dilute it. And zinc sulfate is what most people are using inside in those 10-to-1 solution. So 10 liters of water to 1 kilogram of zinc sulfate powder, and you basically mix it up. It stays there. It works for months and months and months. It's inorganic. It works even when it gets soiled and all that type of thing. And it's a very effective way of getting on top of lameness in a flock very quickly.
Well, and it's a good stage of season to address some of those issues. Michael, look, lameness is one of the topics you're going to be featuring on an open day. That's coming up in 2 weeks' time, I think, is it?
Yeah. So the 15th of July, we're down with Brian and Bloned Keen in Gar, Davidstown, just outside Enniscorthy. The air code there is Y21XOY2. And Brian has been in the Better Farm program, Brian and Bloned, for a number of years now. Brian has put in a batch footbath, has significantly reduced the lameness on his farm. He's also done an awful lot of work in terms of improving your body condition, and we'll see the benefit in terms of lamb performance and the number of lambs on the ground on that as well. And he's also gone into organics. So this is a suckler sheep and tillage farm. So we'll be having a look at the overall farm performance and how he's getting on. So it's a really interesting evening, 7 o'clock on Wednesday, the 15th of July. We'll be kicking off at 7 o'clock and we'll be finishing up around 9 o'clock in the evening time. So should be a good evening out. Lots of information there, lots of tips and tricks to see. So look at anyone in the region or anyone who's willing to go for a bit of a drive there on a Wednesday evening, pop out to us, and we'd love to see you there.
Yep, should be a good event, and we could see how brains are progressing. Michael, look, it was good having you on. Thanks for that update. Plenty of things to focus on for the coming month, and we'll chat to you again.
Thanks, Ciara.
We'll leave it there for this week's episode. There will be a text version of what Michael's discussed available on Teagasc Daily, as well as a host of other information and useful technical articles. That's it for me. I'm Ciara Lynch. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us wherever you get your podcasts.